Did you know that Sudan is currently enduring one of the most brutal civil war conflicts the world has ever seen? That's right. We are about to dive deep the complete and utter collapse of Sudan.
It's a bit of a cliche to say, why doesn't the mainstream media care about this country or that war? But if there is any truly...
I'll tell you why. It's because it's in Africa, and the entire continent is a PvP server. They can never get their shit together. Tribal warfare, us versus them, petty squabbling. This sand is my sand, this sand is your sand.
Ignored war on Earth, it's the one going on in Sudan right now. Since 2023, Sudan has been suffering from complete state breakdown, and owing to its massive population of over 50 million people, making the current crisis not just the making of another failed state, but the largest humanitarian crisis on Earth. In 2025, it was the country with the highest number of people facing famine, of internal refugees, and the most mass death. Beating out, not to use another cliche, these wars you might be a little more familiar with. To fully understand the crisis, you need to understand how Sudan got to this point. But first, let me just try to share.
Israel is not involved, therefore the U.S. silent as a church mouse.
How awful Sudan's civil war is in under 6 minutes. The chain of events started when longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir was ousted after months of popular protests, triggered by economic collapse. Weighing into pressure, the armies called into the capital to defend him instead turned on him in April of 2019. They forced him out, giving the military power for a few months to go through a transitional phase. Two military sects held power together, the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces.
Who are the good guys? Put this in terms of red versus blue.
A paramilitary and business empire which grew out of the Arab supremacist Janjaweed militia.
I'm going to identify a real problem that I and you definitely have. It's so hard for me as a white boy with motion to identify with these historical occurrences because the names just gloss over my fucking head. Janjaweed, that is clinically, comically unserious.
Which, by the way, translates in English to devils on horseback. The SAF was headed by Abdel al-Burhan, while the RSF was led by General Hamdan Dagalo.
I'm already lost, bro. I'm trying my hardest. This is not a funny situation. Hamdan Dagalo? Who is naming these people?
Better known as Hemedti, also known to al-Bashir as my protector.
Yeah, what the fuck? It's so over.
His career has been made through helping the Sudanese government crush rebels, controlling Sudan's gold exports, and sucking up to the president. After the transitional government, the two men which ran these militaries, big surprise, vied for control of the country against each other, rapidly degenerating Sudan into a civil war.
Let's do a quick posture check. How's everyone feeling? Do you understand what's happening? Because I'm lost.
Which broke out in April 2023. The main disparity was over the creation of a joint army. Al-Burhan wanted it done by 2 years, while Hemedti wanted it done by 10. Naturally, they started shooting at each other to solve this debate.
These battle lines don't even make sense either. I'm looking at a bunch of polygons.
Now the SAF controls the East, Nile River, and coastline, posturing itself as the true government, while the RSF controls the West.
Communist or extremist Muslim? Who do you want to kill the innocent? Can't we all just get along? Here at Third Eye Global, kick.com/Philion, everyone is allowed to indulge in slopness.
West, including a region known as Darfur, launching a campaign for either total control of the country or to separate as its own state. The details aren't really hashed out yet. The subsequent fighting has torn the social fabric of Sudan apart. At least 500,000 have died, with 15 million displaced, overwhelming refugee camps, and 25 million suffering from hunger as farms and
over what though?
Food stockpiles are deliberately burned. In a country made up of 40%
Sudan is warlord maxing. Pick your flavor of death. Pray for South Sudan Christians. Yo, pray for everyone.
Children, 90% of them are out of school. This is total collapse. Sudan has seen many civil wars in its history, but none reaching into its major cities. This time around, Sudan's capital and cultural center, the Tri-City area of Khartoum, has seen clashes and airstrikes. So much so that Al Burhan has had...
This is over gold, oil, and religion mostly. Do they even have the mechanisms to refine and mine these resources? I swear to God, every single thing that I see in Africa is just mud hut after mud hut after mud hut.
to flee to Port Sudan. When fighting couldn't be done between these groups, the army switched to civilians, indiscriminately bombing hospitals, schools, markets, and residential areas. Much of the fighting, though, is centered around Darfur, a notoriously arid land which has traditionally been Sudan's poorest region.
They keep fighting and can't build the pipelines, so it's like a lobby of arc raiders you can never loot because you just get third-partied. Got it.
The RSF has won victory after victory, receiving aid through a corridor it captured to East Libya. Sudan has had a troubled history of race relations. Many elites have declared Sudan an officially Arab Islamic country, sparking decades of unrest and conflict between them and the darker-skinned, mainly Christian people of the south.
This is a tale as old as time. Except one of these religions existed 6 centuries before the other. One of them is die by the sword, the other turn the other cheek.
Culminating in South Sudan's secession in 2011. More recently, though, has been the government's and RSF's fight against the non-Arab inhabitants of Darfur, a place literally meaning home of the Fur. This is an ethnically mixed region of Fur, Masalit, and Zagawa peoples, along with many nomadic Arab tribes, many of which moved in the 1980s. Tension in the region over land rights, along with approval from the Bashir regime, culminated in a genocide of the native Africans by Janjaweed forces in the 2000s.
Dude, if you get ran up on by warlords on camels, I mean, like, that's just disrespectful.
Scenario that since the most recent breakout of war has started again. Capturing Al-Fashir, which was a regional hub for the displaced people of Darfur, would mark a huge victory for the RSF. For 18 months, they sieged the city, cutting food and medical supplies, building a wall of dirt.
Do you think certain 3-letter agencies are behind this conflict in some way or the other? Where is the US of A positioned with the CIA? You already know this is some 5D world-bending chess between worldly superpowers.
Around the city and shooting anybody who tried to escape. On October 27th, 2025, they finally captured it, starting what would become the bloodiest few weeks of the year. The mostly Arab soldiers went through the city, systematically torturing and killing all inhabitants over the age of 10. This is a group whose members call for the extermination of all black skins from Darfur, shouting that women will soon have Arab babies, and who've posted these atrocities all over...
Alright, I'm not one to split hairs, but who's gonna tell them that they all seem to be black?
...over social media.
Second of all, this is racist, okay? Where are the bleeding heart liberals on this issue? Why don't I see any protests in New York City about this? I'm just looking for consistency, is all.
It is an attempted ethnic cleansing of Darfur. Tens of thousands died with its capture, a fact only known because of the piles of bodies seen from satellite imagery.
Okay, so what I see here is Islamic expansion and cleansing, so much so that they want to impregnate them so that they have Arab babies.
In a city of this size, that means at least a tenth were killed within weeks of its capture, a speed of mass death not seen in the modern world since the Rwandan genocide.
I just thought it was a religion of peace, bro. Inshallah, brother.
Now,
Unironically, I'm not even joking here. This is what a lot of people don't know, is that there is a sense of Arab supremacy, even within the religion of Islam. if you are not Arab, you're not worthy.
It is in all honesty more likely than not Sudan will collapse. At least it will collapse in its current form, with the West either formally seceding like South Sudan or creating a shadow government that basically acts as its own country without going through the increasingly useless motions of trying to become a UN member state. How could a country get so bad to the point where nobody has the power to stop what will likely go down as one of the worst mass killings of this decade?
You know what? I see the vision for Palantir.
Modern Sudanese history has been a cycle of military rulers, people getting tired of them and their despotism, overthrowing them.
So, when you see a guy with an orange beard like this, is that because he hit the bazaar and got some hair dye, or is he literally ginger? That's a recessive trait.
In popular riots, only to end up with another military ruler. This has happened for 3 cycles, making up 52 of the almost 70 years of independent history. These chunks were the rules of Ibrahim
It's died? That's what I thought.
Aboud, Jafar Namiri, and Omar al-Bashir respectively, each with a couple guys after them in the
Why do they dye their hair?
transition phase to the next military government. Sudan's current crisis is over who gets to lead the 4th. The first 2 dictators basically had the same trajectories. They both came to power through a coup, led a government based on military over civilian rule, centralizing that rule around
Because Muhammad colored his beard orange? Is that true? Is that why every ginger converts to Islam?
their personality and brutally put down rebellions and protests. General Ibrahim Aboud was
See, if Gaddafi wasn't taken out, things would be different in the region, but we aren't ready to talk about that yet. Who took out Gaddafi?
part of the Islamist coalition, while Colonel Jafar Namiri led the leftist one. Instead of tribal governments, to both of these guys, progress was going to come through the Islamization of Sudan. As a result, the defining political problem for most of Sudanese history was what to do.
He was killed by the National Transitional Council, or the NTC. What does that even mean? Second of all, this is an insane physiognomy.
With the South. Christianity was a pre-colonial religion of the people who lived here, and the mountainous and jungly land of the region prevented large-scale Arab or Islamic migrations. The primary solution the northerner elites thought of was to integrate it into a
I'm noticing. Some would say I'm even observing. Uh-oh, I'm beginning to realize.
larger Islamic Sudan. The first constitution of the country already sowed divide when it was written for an explicitly Arab Muslim
I just see a common thread here. I'm just going to come out and say it. I see the problem. I have identified the issue.
nation. Both then tried to Islamize the South, and both faced organized military backlashes in 2 different civil wars. What's ironic is that part of the reason Aboud was ousted was because of fatigue the war brought, and part of the reason Namiri came to power was because he negotiated
North Africans getting one-shotted by Islam, tale as old as time. Yeah, someone had to say it.
the end of that first war. Namiri then went back on that and did what the Islamist coalition couldn't do, create an officially Islamic Sudan, and he did it overnight, enforcing Sharia with
This is literally just a tool to control people. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you'll be.
one presidential decree, again seeing organized resistance from the South. So for the first 5 or so decades of independent Sudanese
And you can say that about all religions, as it is the very fabric that kind of holds Western civilization together. But clearly, not all religions are created equally.
history, the defining motivating force of the military governments was to keep the South in the country through mostly violent means, killings and burning villages. The waves of war would kill and expel millions.
A lot of atheists say that about Christianity. Yeah, I wouldn't dispute that. In some ways, it is.
Mass killings, which would be history defining for most other countries, were just a part of the long history of these wars.
Like, I have problems with a lot of aspects of Christianity, and when you dial it down, Catholicism, Orthodoxy, whatever, Protestantism, but it doesn't detract from the moral figure that is Jesus Christ. I think that man was just onto something.
What didn't help the peace was the discovery of oil in the South, which would represent a great help to the cotton-dependent nation. The national refinery to process it would be built near Khartoum, rather than in the south where it was originally planned for, and the main port to export in Port Sudan. So to get it here, a pipeline would have to be built across the country, keeping the south dependent on the north for economic growth, of which it saw almost none, since no oil was exported until the 2000s. Also planned was the Jonglei Canal
Dude, oil is so 20th century. Have you heard of Bitcoin?
project to transfer water from the marshy south upstream to the north. The government promised foreign investors Sudan would have a green revolution with this project, having more arable land than the rest of the Arab world combined. Southerners protested for the rights to their own oil revenue and water resources, so the government promised development projects for the south, none of which were kept. In fact, the entire canal project was scrapped when the conflict intensified. This second bout of fighting would begin the longest civil war in African history, and
Makes you appreciate the infrastructure we have here in the modern world. Roads, buildings, skyscrapers, plumbing, electricity. They can't even get level 1 done.
ending in the breakup of the country. The main resistance
This is the way.
was the Southern People's Liberation Movement and Army, led by John Garang. Originally, they wanted to found a new Sudan, which was secular, democratic, and socialist, and actually had some northerners
Whoa. I wouldn't go that far.
who were opposed to Islamic rule join it. The government was able to convince America to fund its campaign against these socialist agitators, while their funds came from communist Ethiopia. But after decades of fighting, the SPLM started explicitly calling for separate...
Why can't anyone get capitalism right besides the West? Like, we don't have to live like this. All these other countries are socialist, communist, whack!
separation from the North. What changed for them was the start of the third military cycle. Namiri was ousted in 1985 in ineffective administration.
Maybe that's just the inherent power dynamic. Control the masses. Because in a communist, socialist regime, you have theocracy, autocracy, dictatorship, authoritarianism, and only the elites can enjoy the fruits of the labor off the proletariat. The slaves, the peasants, the peons.
couldn't keep power,
Like the idea of a free market, like that's, huh?
only to be cooed by the National Islamic Front, in charge al-Turabi and al-Bashir. The new NIF government would do just as the others had done, continue fighting the South and crush...
Is that not the same guy? I'm not even trying to be funny. Is this not the same guy? Hassan al-Turabi, Omar al-Bashir. They got the same glasses, same nose, same drip.
crushing their political opponents. But just 10 years after they took charge, the NIF split.
All right, so why don't Muslims like Christians? Well, they'll tell you they do, until you get decapitated. They refer to them as people of the book. There's this whole thing called the Islamic dilemma. It's pretty fascinating. I'll pull it up here. It's a logical fallacy that completely invalidates their entire faith. The Islamic dilemma, sometimes called the trilemma or Quranic dilemma, is a logical argument used primarily by Christian apologists to challenge the internal consistency of Islamic theology, particularly regarding the authority and preservation of the Quran and previous scriptures. The three horns of the dilemma are as follows. The Torah and Gospel, or the Injil, are the inspired word of God. The Quran repeatedly affirms this. Today's Torah and Gospel have been corrupted, or the Tarif, a common Muslim apologetic claim, and implied in some verses, is that Jews and Christians altered their scriptures, so the Bible we have today is not trustworthy. And lastly, the Quran confirms the scriptures that were in the people of the book in Muhammad's time. The Quran explicitly says it confirms, or the Musaddiq, the scriptures that are currently in their hands at the time of Muhammad. It even commands Christians to judge by the gospel they possess. All of three of these claims cannot be simultaneously true. If 1 and 3 are true, the Torah and gospel in the 7th century were still the uncorrupted word of God, because the Quran confirms the scriptures the Jews and Christians had at the exact time. But if 2 is true, those same scriptures were already corrupted by the 7th century. Therefore, the Quran is confirming corrupted scriptures as divine revelation, which is self-contradictory. Alternatively, if the scriptures were corrupted before Muhammad, and the Quran is wrongly confirming corrupted books. If they were corrupted after Muhammad, then the Quran failed to preserve Allah's previous revelations, despite promising to guard revelation. There is your theology lesson of the day.
Not into ideological sects, but over who should be in charge. Before that, al-Turabi's most significant addition to history was being chums with bin Laden and getting Sudan put on America's state sponsors of terrorism list, ending all American aid to the country. Long story short, as the economy waned under sanctions, al-Bashir and the National Congress Party would take charge, marking a slowdown of the war with the South. For one reason, al-Turabi was the one more concerned with pushing an Islamic Sudan south. Secondly, the war was no longer affordable. Too many human and fiscal resources were going towards it, while sanctions were weighing heavy on the government. Thirdly, this new oil provided a huge incentive to end the war to get it going. And last, al-Bashir focused his military administration on another region, Darfur. During the Second Civil War with the South, fighting spread to the west as al-Bashir viewed Darfur with the same contempt that many viewed the South with.
Where are they getting their weapons and ammunition from? Is it Russia? Is it the US? How are they armed to the teeth? Or are they just shoddy AK-47s?
See, throughout the 1980s, a flow of nomadic Arabs came into the region to escape a decade-long war between Libya and Chad, which, by the way, in its final act concluded with the Great Toyota War. Libya's dictator Muammar Gaddafi had planned on expanding his kingdom down into Chad and eventually the entire Sahara. To help
Could you imagine being king of Chad?
this, he set up training camps around his enemies. Darfur's unpoliced Wild West was a great staging post for
Russian private military corporations operate there.
his fight against the Chadian Hissène
Or is it contractors?
Habré. But a mix of refugees, weapons, and a constant stream of racial supremacy doesn't usually end up great for the
I told you, racial supremacy, ethnocentrism. It's never gonna work out in the Big 2-5.
local population. Though the two groups had coexisted for decades before, even commonly marrying into each other's families, that didn't last when the drought came. Then, tensions boiled over between native farmers and the nomadic herders over what little water supplies remained. What followed was complete breakdown, to the point where the police had to beg for fuel so they could do their routine patrols. And it was around this time when devils
Back to Janjaweed.
on horseback started to float around
Those aren't even horseback, that's camelback. That's humpback, and not the whale.
in relation to these new Chadian professional fighters. When Gaddafi failed to take Chad, many nomadic Arabs stayed in Darfur. Years of Arab oppression went by before they revolted under the Sudan Liberation Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement. Fearing the region would end up like South Sudan,
It's always just some fucking guy with flip-flops in an RPG. Professional freedom fighters. Bro's got the rainbows on. Fucking Nike slides. And a noob tube.
al-Bashir empowered the Janjaweed to do as they pleased, burn villages and kill locals on
The Wagner group from Russia is in Sudan. May have heard of them in Ukraine. Oh, I'm aware of the Wagner group.
mass. Because many in the forces aren't paid, they've been incentivized to loot as much as they can, leaving behind empty apartments, offices, and shops, leaving refugees to swell in makeshift
Essentially, it's Putin's rogue division. Organized mercenaries.
tent cities in the suburbs. The Darfurian genocide saw the deaths of at least 500,000 people throughout the Second Civil War, an atrocity which
Like if our SEALs went rogue? Exactly. I don't believe they are as lethal or competent because there's levels to this shit. But when you airdrop them into Sudan, yeah, they're going to do some damage. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Prigozhin was the leader of Wagner, and he was shot down or mysteriously crashed in an airplane when he disobeyed Putin and tried to lead a pseudo coup. Some of you will remember this guy from a couple years ago. I believe he wanted more resources from Putin, and Putin was like, lower your tone. The Ukrainian Special Forces officer explained to me that the way Wagner fighters have been operating has been in groups of 8. A team of 8 will run, crawl, and zigzag towards the Ukrainian line. The team consists of a team leader, a drone operator, and 6 mules. The mules carry as much ammunition as possible, including RPG launchers and machine guns. Once the team of 8 advances 20 to 30 meters, if indeed they survive, they then try to dig a trench which will form the beginning of a new Russian front line. They then try to hide themselves and their weapons in this trench. Then a second wave of Wagner fighters will join them and try to make this trench deeper and longer. If they survive and establish this new front line, then professional Wagner fighters, or the old Wagners, will join them, or sometimes professional Russian fighters may take over these new positions. However, the reality is the chances of a new Wagner fighter doing this many times and surviving is very low. So they send in cannon fodder, and then the big boys show up. Wagner fighters earn $400 or $600 a day when they are fighting, which is much more than a regular Russian soldier would earn. When they are not in active combat, they receive as little as $100 per day, which is still more money than they'd be earning in a prison in Siberia or living in Sudan, Sierra Leone, or Mali. And Prigozhin is now dead.
Mehdi played a key and personal role in, and one which also made al-Bashir the first head of state ever to be indicted by the International Criminal Court for his role in masterminding it. As the military shifted its focus here, it left the South to negotiate their way out of the whole mess. Al-Bashir was open to it, and in 2005 they signed the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, outlining the post-war divisions of wealth and power, as well as giving the South the option to secede by 2011.
Now, for some added context, the U.S. has their own version of Wagner. I don't know if they operate more ethically, but if you've ever heard of Blackwater, the PMC, Constellus, formerly Blackwater, is an American PMC founded in 1997 by former Navy SEAL officer Eric Prince. It was renamed Z Services in 2009, renamed again Academi in 2011, acquired by a group of private investors, merged with Triple Canopy to form Constellus Holdings. And even cooler, they have custom watches.
Sketchy dudes wear Breitling. We don't make the rules. And when it comes
the Blackwater Breitling, so I can get a picture. And apparently this has an emergency signaling ping built into the watch.
Modern digital quartz movement, but it also contained an antenna.
It's got a 121.5 beacon. This is almost 20 years old, but it broadcasts on 121.5 International Guard frequency. So any commercial aircraft is going to have a radio tuned to this, and it beeps out SOS, so you can locate and rescue whoever needs it.
Commercial and military aircraft routinely monitor the frequency.
That's some real James Bond shit. And it has their sigil, their tabard, right here. A little icon on the face. So if you see a motherfucker wearing this watch, bro's KDA is probably out of control.
Reason, the NCP viewed the South as a distinct people rather than a vacuum to be filled. Another, the American government pressured the country into it by promising to lift their sanctions if they gave the Christians freedom, which did not end up happening after news of the Darfur genocide broke. In 2011, with a nearly 99% margin, they voted to become independent. However, in one agreement during the war, the South would be defined as this line, the 3 original provinces, but in this new CPA, they would allow...
All right, so you have a northern Islamic-ruled opposition and a southern Christian province system divided into 3 pieces.
Allows South Kordofan, Blue Nile, and Abyei to join as well, creating a disputed border that lasts to this day.
Similar to Nigeria?
Sudan doesn't really have any borders right now. It didn't help that they agreed to split oil revenues 50-50, but around 3/4 of oil reserves were found in the south. So before and after independence, the two halves again fought over the border, especially over the oil-rich province of Abyei, leading to more deaths, displacements, and a harsh version of Sharia being implemented in the north.
Strict dress code, morality police, death for apostasy, ban on mixed gender gatherings. Yeah, that's your future, liberal.
A version shaped by al-Bashir. He said there would be no more question of diversity now that the South is gone. A pretty bad foreshadowing as to how he viewed.
Rhetorical question, why are most parts of the world that have Muslim majority in some kind of forever war? Mashallah.
How he wanted his country to run, while the South pretty much devolved into ethnic slaughter as soon as it got independence. The decade between the end of the war and the South's independence was the only time Sudan really had an economic boom, as it used oil revenues to invest into education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Look at this graph of Sudanese foreign exchange earnings. The biggest thing here was oil, with gold barely making the same dent. 95% of foreign exchange and 60% of government.
This is a huge problem when your only export is one resource. That's why the Middle Eastern countries are trying to move off of oil, because it's not sustainable.
Government revenue was tied to oil. Al-Bashir had also built a patronage network based on this oil revenue. Again, see the crash, where subsidies to basic goods were given to the Sudanese middle class, bribes and development projects were given to business and local elites, and funding to private security forces were all dependent on these fields. He also siphoned billions to overseas bank accounts for himself. Thus, after the loss of this chunk in 2011, he was screwed. From its peak of $10 billion in 2010, foreign exchange earnings fell to around $300 million in 2016, 3% of what they were. Al-Bashir then tried to ramp up pipeline costs to Port Sudan, which the South Sudanese president responded with murder-suicide, ceasing to transport all oil through the pipe. When that was resolved and it really dawned on al-Bashir how
What a clown show. Get it together.
little sources of foreign revenue he had left, he institutionalized the Janjaweed, rebranding them as the RSF and allowing them to do whatever they could to make money. He basically privatized this militia group. They exported soldiers to the Yemeni civil war to make some money, got into construction, trading weapons, but most importantly, started gold production. Especially after they captured the massive Jebel Amir gold mine in Darfur. Big shocker, this didn't replace Sudan's lost foreign exchange, and as an import-reliant country, losing their reserves would result in a, what we can say now, country-ending crisis. In 2018, his patronage network formally collapsed.
All right, so they tried to tap the gold, but they fumbled the bag.
When he ended subsidies to bread and fuel, nearly tripling the price of food for the average person, starting the protests which ousted him, taking us back to where we started. The loss of South Sudan broke al-Bashir's patronage system and left a bloated military with nothing to do. Attempting layoffs would threaten the regime, as many young, military-trained men would suddenly be out of work. To give you some perspective,
South Sudan became its own country in 2011. I feel like that's important context. That just missed me.
roughly 70% of the government's spending went into the army or private security groups in 2016, while 2% went to education and 1% went to health spending. Throughout this whole thing, the RSF, likely seeing the writing on the walls, created their own streams of revenue to stay independent from the central government. A far ways from Hemedti's humble beginnings as a camel trader, he now controls the region's mines and oil refineries, cementing a literal business empire in
It's
the
just a Settlers of Catan map.
desert. Their most important connection is with the UAE, which is the world's hub of gold refining and trading. It's been reported that they've sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold to the Emirates through Hemedti's family company Al Junaid, and that the Emirati government has funded the paramilitary with smuggled weapons and aid through the eastern Libyan corridor.
Isn't the UAE an ally of the US?
Of course, they officially deny all of this, but the Emirati business interests in the country are too great. It's one of the biggest gold-producing regions on Earth, and by placing a bet on the RSF winning the war or seceding, they can keep growing their position as the world's gold superpower. They also rely on Sudan for food imports, as it was an al-Bashir program to sell some of Sudan's farmland to many Middle Eastern powers for their own food security, seeing what a lack of it could lead to. Keeping Sudan semi-functioning is just in the interest of the Emirates. And according to some experts, if they withdrew
So the oil princes are just smurfing in Sudan.
tomorrow, there's a good chance the war would end real quick. Also involved in the war are Russia's Wagner Group, also betting on the RSF to win to protect gold supplies under the Mero Gold Company. And on the other side, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, Ukraine, and the Russian government, who would all like to see some sort of stability in what they view as a geostrategically important region. Despite all their atrocities, the RSF still wants to project themselves as
This is the messiest shit I've ever seen in my entire life. I think I'm actually dumber having watched this video. I mean, I appreciate how in-depth it is, but it's impossible to absorb. If somebody asks me tomorrow, do you know what's going on in Sudan? I'm going to say, nope. Muslims versus Christians, North versus South, gold, oil, backed by Russia, UAE, guns go burr, camel riders, Janjaweed, usual shit.
force of democracy and peace to gain governing legitimacy. In a world where
That's sad but true. No one's going to ask because no one cares.
you don't really have to go through these motions anymore. In 2025, the RSF came together to declare a government of peace and unity, drafting a constitution for what their new country may look like. And although there's not really another government on Earth who buys this delusion, basically sanctioned by the whole Western world, there's also not a government
Yeah, the West is just like, it's a shame. Yeah, that's crazy. Anyway.
who really cares much to do anything about it. Meanwhile, sitting in the southern Nuba Mountains, a remnant of a past war can be found in a new
Damn, for real?
form. Distracted by the civil war, the SPLM has attacked and set up a little republic of New Sudan, comprising about 500,000 people. They've started their own English language schools, made their own court system outside of Islamic law, and have started the fight for a Western-style secular democracy.
Let's go! New Sudan, baby! Sudan Plus! Sudan Premium!
It's a reminder as to how far Sudan has gone in its current crisis, that the issue the government has spent almost its entire existence trying
This is the way.
to stop has just gone ahead because nobody has the capacity or care to squash these southern rebels. Unfortunately, there's just not that much care to go around for what is almost certainly Sudan's largest crisis in its existence. Not much care for the increasingly nihilistic people living there, leaving behind no governing structure for society, and, unless you're the Emirati Sheikh, not much care from the outside world as well. If you enjoyed this video and are a long-time viewer but haven't subscribed, please do. It's free and it will go like beep boop in the algorithm, being like rocket fuel for this channel. And
What are we supposed to do? How can I help? I'm God's strongest soldier. I need harder battles.